Hi, I'm Lee Maxey, CEO at MindMax, and I'm grateful to be here with Kim Siegenthaler, who is the Associate Vice Chancellor of Academic Innovation for CUNY's central office, the City University of New York. Great to see you, and I've always enjoyed listening to you, following your career from a variety of schools, but most importantly, I think you have a very realistic view of opportunities and what schools are situated to be able to do. So you've been very plain spoken about what you think, and I think it's been very aligned with what's possible. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're at a conference that's talking about micro-credentials and connecting up different parts of a university or institution. CUNY is a very large and complicated institution that's serving a very large number of people. Can you talk about how you're working or how it is working to get connections across the different parts of the institution?
Yeah, so I think two words you've already mentioned are really important for that conversation. One is convergence and one is connection. So in my work at the central office, I work across all of CUNY's 25 institutions to try and help advance a number of initiatives. And one of those is really about credentials to careers and how do we help ensure appropriate pathways for students that may or may not involve a traditional degree. And with 7 community colleges and 11 4 years, and then another group of graduate and professional schools, ensuring a seamless connection for learners so that they can move from an industry credential or an associate's degree into a bachelor's degree in the same modality, earn another micro-credential, a graduate certificate, or whatever that is requires a lot of convergence across the various campuses and within the Office of Academic Affairs, also at the central level, where we have my Office of Academic Innovation, we have the Office of Academic and Faculty Affairs, we have the Office of Career and Industry Partnerships, and those 3 offices work very closely together to advance this work. And our leadership for CPL sits within one of those teams. Our online education
Is CPL like CETL?
CPL, credit for prior learning.
Oh, okay, credit for prior learning. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha,
so
gotcha.
that work sits in one. Career and Industry Partnerships sits over here. And so the collaborative effort is essential for us to get any sort of traction. And the communication about what we're doing and where the opportunities are. And, we were talking a little bit before about the industry partnerships. And in New York City, CUNY is very fortunate to have almost an infinite number of potential industry partners or active partners, and trying to balance what they want with what the colleges are able and willing to provide, and how those things all connect and align in a way that is beneficial to learners is that's part of the messy challenge.
Having been in sales and marketing and also in the learning world, the concept of what I'd call an ideal customer profile is a term that I've heard many, many times. With those business partners, what are the types of factors or characteristics of I'll say a good partnership opportunity, whether it's type of industry, whether it's size, whether it's what they're looking for? What are some characteristics when you see, like you said, you can't serve all of the metro area. So what is it that would say, oh, that's a kind of a company or a kind of a sector that we would really like to serve, and it would be not easy, but it would be more likely to succeed if we worked with them?
Well, so I'll give you an example of where we are working with a lot of success. So across CUNY, we have 350 credentials in health and human services. Everything from like a certified nursing assistant to a PhD in nursing and healthcare administration. I mean, just the entire gamut, clinical and non-clinical, the traditional degrees, all sorts of different sorts of stackable micro credentials and that kind of thing. And so what we have seen, what we see is that in New York City, the demand for healthcare professionals is just off the charts. And so we now have and are developing more partnerships with healthcare systems, hospital systems, where CUNY provides the didactic part, and then the healthcare system provides the clinical setting and supervision. So we have situations where they have phlebotomists. They want them to become medical technologists. They want to keep their own folks. And so they provide all of the resources there. They pay the tuition for their students. And then CUNY comes in and delivers the actual course content. And so those partnerships are really, they're mutually beneficial, right? They meet a critical need within the city. And we're equal partners in that they are bringing something to the equation. They're not expecting us to do everything. They're doing heavy lifting and we're doing heavy lifting. And so it is truly a partnership.
Yeah, I was just speaking at a session talking about cost of acquisition for people taking micro-credentials in an open enrollment scenario. And I think I think just the evolution of where we are in the marketplace of students even being aware of what's possible, I think that's a pretty hard thing right now. So looking at the university to business or B2B or biz dev approach, I really do think that has to be the first step to creating a pull for micro-credentials. I'd be interested to hear how you developed that, whether it's with the healthcare system, whether it's with another area. But I know it takes time and relationship, but what are some of the approaches that have led to that success?
Well, I mean, for us, it really takes dedicated personnel. Mm-hmm. So we have a university dean for health and human services who comes from the corporate side and has deep connections in the city with healthcare systems, understands the need inside and out, and then develops relationships across our colleges with the deans of health and human services to bring those together and to talk about what the opportunities are. And it really, if you don't have someone with that sort of expertise and that kind of connection, I mean, the connections are super challenging to make. And so sometimes at other institutions, what we've had is someone who really understands the industry side, but they don't understand the academic side enough to move things forward. Or they understand the academic side, but they don't understand the industry side. And I was in some conversation yesterday, or there was a presentation. They were talking about, in fact, the opening session yesterday, they were talking about we're using the same language, we're using the same words, but what we mean by that is totally different. And so you can talk like this, and you each think that you're communicating and that you're aligned, and then you realize, no, we're not, because we mean very different things. And so it's important to have people who can translate the academic to the industry to the academic. But I think one of the other things when you're talking about like the kind of those open enrollment types of credentials and what do learners really want, what does the employer really want, and a conversation that we've had around micro credentials is how micro is too micro, because sometimes you'll have employers who say, well, it's so important that our employees are proficient in Excel. They know how to develop spreadsheets and all of this. Yeah, and you're like, okay, great. Are you going to hire someone just because they know how to do an Excel spreadsheet? Or is there something more? Because we can develop, and in fact, we did develop a microscopic credential, right?
And nano.
Yeah, and we had some enrollments in it, but then nobody got a job because they had completed this nano credential, right? It was just not enough to make them stand out with an employer. And so I think that's also part of the understanding, the conversation that has to happen with that potential industry partner is, yes, you say you want this thing, but if we give you people who have that thing, are you going to hire them over someone else? Are you going to promote them? Are you going to give them a salary increase? Because if there's not that benefit to the learner, there's not that value to us. And what is the value to you?
Reminds me of worked in the 90s with Cisco around reusable learning objects and how small a learning object could be, but then how many objects needed to stack to become meaningful in a competency. But one of the terms that I was chuckling when you were saying terms mean different things. Like one of the terms that comes to mind is speed or agility, which might mean one thing to a company and it might mean a whole other thing to a large academic institution. Along those lines, I know that the agility and speed is critical for industry. What are the things that you're doing to try and be agile and responsive in the speed of business, not in the speed of academia?
Well, that's almost an impossible ask.
Yeah.
Particularly at an institution as large and complex at CUNY, because you are, I mean, even when we're talking about non-credit offerings, which is, we can be more nimble there, but, you know, when faculty are involved, faculty typically move at a certain pace. And even if you're talking about repackaging coursework that you already have, you know, you have this, and this are all approved courses. This supports that major, that minor, whatever it is. And you say, this is great if we, you know, draw a circle around these 3 or 4 courses and we make a micro credential out of that. Well, where did they come from? Did they all come from the same department? Did they all come from the same college? You know, this is a super course over here at, for example, York College, but another one that really aligns well with that is over here at Hunter College. And then this great one from LaGuardia Community College. Well, what does it take to pull all those together into a single, and who owns it? Right? Because the central office is not a degree granting institution. Right. We can't own it. One of the colleges has to. And so, all right, so how do we do that? You know, and I think that's one of the challenging, the difficult conversations that you have with industries, because they think you can turn it over overnight and deliver. And you're like, no, we can't. There are reasons that we can't do that. In our adult and continuing ed units, there's more nimbleness, but still the matter of, you have to find the expertise. You know, if you're talking about building something new, you have to find that expertise, because again, it's not something that you are already necessarily staffed up to do. In terms of the knowledge base, and then creating that, and then making it available. So, like you said, those words have very different meaning in academia and in industry.
I'm going to follow that to the actual development and creation of content, and I'm going to go maybe out of the current and practical to future, as AI is involved more in content development. And I know we went through this conversation 15 years ago around IP, as one faculty member develops an online course but is no longer the deliverer of that course. There was a lot of conversation around whose course is it, whose IP is it, and that's where a lot of the revenue share division came in inside of an institution. But I think the same kind of thing is going to happen with AI development of programs, conjunction with faculty. Where do you see that going?
Wow, that's a real crystal ball kind of question. And I will say, that is very frightening to faculty.
Oh, I'm sure.
I come from faculty. It's been a while since I've sat in that seat, but I come from there, and so I certainly relate to that concern that all of a sudden you're going to turn to AI and say, I designed the syllabus for my introduction to psychology, and I think I want to use this textbook. What other additional readings should I have? And map that out for me. Okay, fantastic. Now go in and so what we said module 1 was, and here's the text. What are the key things that I should cover? What develop a quiz for my students, and potentially AI in its current iteration could do that. I'm not convinced that it does it well in every case. I've been playing with AI a lot over the last year. AI is one of the things that's been added to my portfolio at CUNY. So I've been playing with a lot and have discovered, okay, on this day, this particular system gets an A on this task. And the next day it gets an F on a similar task, and this other one gets a C minus. And so, I think the potential's there. And again, if we're talking about things that are non-credit, that's a lot less threatening than if we're talking about things that are credit bearing. But it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. I have no idea where that's going to go. I'm interested to watch. We think about, we were just 18, 20 months ago when ChatGPT hit the scene and all of the panic around that, and how that's calmed to a great extent, and then the use has spread. And what we see faculty, it's not super widespread to my knowledge yet, but we do see faculty at CUNY who work with their students to determine how we will use AI in this course, knowing that that's important for students to develop that skill set, but that we need to together define what the rules are and figure out how to use it well to achieve the course objectives, not to bypass them, not to make the course easier for students, not as a solution to, an anti-cheating solution, but as part of the learning experience.
Yeah. Our son's sophomore last semester, he took a course writing with AI, where they actively tried to explore how to effectively use AI in your writing to have your voice. So you talked about prompts, and I have a background in instructional design, and it's not hard to imagine having a series of good prompts to go further than where you went, which is to say, okay, here are my learning objectives. Here are my enabling or learning objectives. Create a video to highlight this key learning objective with this drama and this persona. I mean, you can prompt using good instructional design methodology with good prompts, even with it today, to create a media-rich course.
Yeah.
Way beyond just the syllabus.
And way beyond just the talking head.
And way beyond the talking. No one's watching a talking head. I mean,
don't tell our faculty.
they're not. They don't have the attention span. And I don't just mean kids. I mean people don't have the attention span to watch a talking head. So I do think we're coming to we're on our way to a very challenging time. I want to go back to CUNY and New York, and you're in a really special place and proud leadership. But I think we often talk about business and academia and don't often include government or don't often include policy, or which is a big part of the ecosystem. I think you guys are in a very special place at CUNY where you're thinking that way. And if you could talk about how you think about those three legs of a stool in relationship to supporting the metro area.
Well, and of course, then when you bring the nonprofit, the government sector in, you've got yet another language.
Right. Exactly.
Right? So now so we're all three talking, and none of us means the same thing.
Yep.
And we are fortunate at CUNY to have support from the city, strong support from the city, support from the state, but along with that comes expectations and demands. And so balancing, and again, to a great extent, even though there's an immense interest and enthusiasm for what CUNY can provide and give to the city and give to the state, they're not the academics, and they don't always understand what they're asking and whether or not that's possible. And of course, they're also the ones who impose on us many of the rules and the regulations that make it difficult for us to achieve what it is they'd like us to achieve. And so it's this careful choreographed sort of dance and trying to understand one another, advance shared goals, and move the needle. And of course, the government sector understands far better than the corporate that things don't happen quickly in New York. So you do get a little bit of that relief, but there is also an expectation that you will deliver. I mean, there is an expectation of accountability that is far greater in coming from the city and the state than obviously the industry partner, because the city and the state hold the purse strings. And we have an absolute obligation to fulfill our commitments there and make sure that we are serving, in particular, residents of New York City.
Thoughts you have about, we've had the pandemic, I'll call it crisis. There was the recession in 2008, 9.
Whatever, yeah.
Yep. There was 9/11. There was HIPAA. There was Y2K. All these things that have caused, in my mind, leaps forward because of something happening, and who knows what the next thing's going to be. But whatever the next thing is, what are some things that you would love to see changed, that break a barrier or open up a pathway, something that would make things better or easier in terms of meeting the mission that CUNY has?
Well, and so I think there are a couple of things, and we've heard some of it already this week, is moving beyond this dichotomous position that it's online or in person. It's one or the other. And, online is going to cannibalize, and it's going to disrupt, and it's going to take over the university, or micro-credentials, or non-credit, that it's either the traditional degree or it's going to take over, it's going to cannibalize, it's going to harm. And, I would love to see us get beyond that kind of thinking that any of this is oppositional, that any of it is competitive, because it's all part of this larger mosaic of how do we meet the educational needs of our learners. and understanding that they are not monolithic, and they come from, and of course CUNY is one of the most diverse universities in the country, and perhaps in the world. I mean, we have over 100 languages spoken on an individual campus, right? So to look at that population and say, well, you all need this thing, shaped this way. I mean, it's just silly. But we get stuck in our own way of thinking about what learners need or what they want. And so if we can, I've always been a real advocate for access, and access to me means creating as many avenues as possible for students to engage in as many ways as possible so that they can advance academically and professional at their pace and in a way that works for them. And so every time we try and put a box around a degree, a credential, or credit, non-credit, or online, modality or whatever it is, it's detrimental, I think, to the institutional mission and CUNY explicitly the institutional mission of access.
One last thought as I have is that we often talk about courses and degrees and units of learning, and it really is about people and people's journey, pathway, whatever you want to call it for them. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how we can stop being so institution-centric in our thinking and be, like you said, serving the pathway or journey that people are on, and maybe move away from having them come to us versus showing up in their lives in a way that connects to their pathways.
Yeah, that's a great question. If I had that answer, but I mean, I think a lot of it is just reiterating endlessly the mission of the institution.
Mm-hmm.
It's about education.
Yep.
It is about access. It is about giving learners the preparation, the education that they need to succeed in life.
Yep.
Whether that's in a profession or in their personal life,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever that might be. If we if we can put the learner and keep the learner in the forefront, and if we can lead every conversation with what is in the best interest of the learner, then we can better get out of our own way. But let's face it, most higher ed institutions are bureaucracies.
Yep.
And there's only a certain amount of getting out of your way that you can. And I think that's one reason that we're seeing efforts at creating sort of these, and I'm going to use the word we're sort of trying to ban here, alternative, alternative types of institutions, that are trying not to have that bureaucracy, trying to, do things in a different way that are more accessible, more learner focused.
Thin client.
Yeah. And
is an old term. Right?
Yeah. Will they be successful? I don't know. Can they attract the critical mass that they need to remain financially viable? Will they evolve into a bureaucracy? Most things do over time, particularly the larger they get. I mean, that just seems to be the nature of things. So I guess my only hope is that putting the learner at the forefront and talking about the learner and understanding who our learners are is our best way to make sure that we are not being a hindrance to them, and that we are not only about the credentials, but the whole support services that we provide, is that we're not creating our own barriers to students, but that we are creating we are opening the doors and opening the avenues for them to move forward.
Well, thank you, Kim. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Always appreciate the conversation.
Yeah.